Hey, I'm Mac. Welcome back to my channel. All right, so what we're going to be looking at today is something a little bit different. First of all, I just want to say this is going to be a pretty critical video, but I think my criticism is constructive. Okay, we're going to be looking at someone else's video and I'm going to be criticizing it because I think that the video I'm about to go through with you is emblematic of a larger scale problem we have as a society, where we kind of just let people involved in the tech sector just run their mouths without applying any sort of critical thinking or skepticism. And I think that that's gotten us into a really bad place. And so I think that by going through this video that I'm going to show you, we can perhaps shed some light on some critical thinking skills that might be missing here. So the video we're going to be taking a look at is by the channel The Nostalgia Nerd. I'm sure he's a nice guy. You gotta do better than this, man. You gotta do better than this. This is garbage, dude, and you know it's garbage. And if you don't know it's garbage, then you got a bigger problem. It's like, holy shit. It's some of the stupidest stuff that I've ever heard one person say, and another person is just like, yeah. So the video is titled, "This Tech Ended for the Worst Reason." And then we have a very tasteful thumbnail here where we can see the device that we're talking about on the left side here, and then on the right we can see the same type of little cloud graphic being used to represent 2,700 people's lives being ended with the explosion in the World Trade Center on 9/11. So I guess it's related. It's a real cultural touchstone for me. I mean, personally, that's the rule that I apply on Grindr. You see, I don't have sex with anybody who cannot personally remember 9/11. That's my age limit. But I mean, what an interesting angle. Let's see where this goes, okay? It's so frustrating. Listen, constructive criticism hurts because it's usually something that's true and it's something they're making a good point. Usually when someone's criticizing you, and they're usually criticizing something that you worked very hard to create, but just because it hurts and just because it's hurtful doesn't mean that it's not constructive, okay? We got to do better, okay? Let's take a look. Everybody Wang Chung tonight. Everybody have fun tonight.
This video might seem to be about light-hearted tech, but it's actually one of the most interesting and tragic tech tales now being told in its entirety for the very first time.
You know, sometimes there's a good reason that a story hasn't been told. Also, we'll see if it's tragic or not, okay? Let's remember, we're talking about an event where 2,700 people were killed, okay? So let's not play it too fast and loose with the word tragic if we're talking about a product failure, okay? But, you know, sometimes when a story hasn't been told, you know, like this story or J-Lo's love story that was never told, sometimes it's best to leave it that way. But I guess that's not what we're doing here today.
The late 1900s were all about innovation, bringing things to the forefront that previously just weren't possible.
The 1900s is 1900 through 1909. I'm sorry, that is how it works. Like, if people who were born in that century are still alive, that's not how we talk about that century. It's just not.
And one of those used a sense that even today goes mostly wasted.
You ready for this?
That's our sense of smell.
It was the winter of 1998 when Joel Bellinson and Dexter Smith, both Stanford graduates, were on holiday in South Beach, Florida, and dreamt up the concept. Sitting around on the beach, Bellinson recounted how there were all these hot ladies, nice beaches, good vibes, and the smells were just hitting me. I took a deep breath and said, "Man, is there some way I can capture this and give all the other loser geeks on the internet a taste of the outside world?"
What the fuck are you talking about? What smells in Miami, Florida, could possibly have been so wonderful to inspire this? Seriously, what? What were you smelling in Miami, Florida? Puke? Piss? Red Tide? Pall Mall menthols? A 40 ounce of Steel Reserve malt liquor? What? I'm sorry, but Miami does not smell good. Okay, it smells like a normal city with a hint of like gross ocean. Seriously, what scents specifically were you smelling that were so magical on the beach in Miami, Florida, that you found that inspirational? Would you like to share it with the rest of the class? What? That doesn't make any sense to me. I don't know what the fuck you're talking about.
Having previously launched a successful gene sequencing software company called Pangea Systems and the website Double Twist, Bellinson, a molecular biologist, and Smith, an industrial engineer, had the know-how, they thought, to put it to the test.
Not a molecular biologist, okay? He has a BA in biology, and that's it. Which, no shade to that. My undergraduate degree is a BA in biology, okay? And you know what? I'm not a molecular biologist. If I had wanted to be a molecular biologist, well, probably the first step to being a molecular biologist would have been to get a Bachelor of Science in biology and not a Bachelor of Arts in biology. A Bachelor of Science is the degree that you get if you are if your goal is to be in like a research position doing like actual research work for a company or for a university, for a lab, for a pharmaceutical company or whatever, where your job is doing scientific research. You would get a Bachelor of Science degree. It requires a lot more technical coursework, a lot more demanding coursework, a lot more involved coursework, and you'll probably also be doing, you will be involved in research even in your undergraduate degree if you're getting a Bachelor of Science. A Bachelor of Arts is what you would get if your intent is not to become a scientific researcher or an academic or whatever, but rather to get into something where it's necessary for you to have a base level of knowledge in a scientific field, but where you're not intending to do research, where that's not going to be your primary activity. So like a lot of people who would get a BA in biology would be like, if you're going to medical school, if you're going to pharmacy school, that might be the undergraduate degree that you would get. Doctors need to have scientific knowledge. Pharmacists need to have scientific knowledge, but they are not scientists. You know, like they are medical professionals. So no, he's not a molecular biologist. Settle down. Also, Pangea was not a gene sequencing company. Pangea was a bioinformatics company. Bioinformatics is the field of using computers to analyze biological data. Usually what we're talking about when we say that is to analyze DNA data, like DNA sequences, or it could be analyzing protein structure, analyzing protein folding. But usually there's DNA involved, some kind of sequencing, because molecular biology as a field of study basically it would be impossible for it to really exist without computers. In the 1950s, the first successful DNA sequences were finished. They got the results, and they were pretty quick to realize, I'm sure it was too much disappointment, that these sequences, it's not going to be practical to be able to analyze these by hand and draw out any type of meaningful insights from these, or to be able to compare a DNA sequence from one sample to a DNA sequence from another, where you're going to have to like match up these particular letters, you know, in a sea of billions of letters. Like, you're just not going to be able to, like, you have to figure out how to get a computer to do this. All fields of science, computers are very important for all fields of science, but molecular biology was one of the sort of forerunning fields in applying and integrating computers to analytics and analyzing data, being able to work with huge sets of data. And so that's why there is this specialized term for the field of application of computers to biological data, bioinformatics. And that's what Pangea did. Pangea was working with tools, software tools used to analyze already done DNA sequences. They were not like actually in the lab doing DNA sequencing. That's not what they did. They're doing stuff to create software or to modify software or to apply software to this. They're different things, okay? It's not the same thing. It's important to be accurate, you know? You can't just steamroll through here and then do your 20-minute ad read for Squarespace.
They could also get the initial finance, having already founded their own venture catalyst company, Libra Digital, which had helped the likes of Mark Cantor's Broadland Mechanics, Cantor having previously founded Macromedia. Upon returning from Florida to their base in California, Bellinson started investigating the role genes play in detecting smells, finding an experiment where neurobiologist Linda Buck engineered a virus to stimulate odor receptors.
That's not the study that we're talking about here. She did engineer a virus as part of a later research project, but that's not the project that we're talking about here. That's not what she won the Nobel Prize for.
She discovered that when odor molecules drift into the nose, each of them binds with a particular protein on the surface of a neuron. There are approximately 1,000 odor-matching proteins across a human's 10 million odor-detecting neurons. When the shape of an odor molecule matches the shape of a protein, they lock together, triggering the neuron and sending a signal to the brain which recognizes the smell.
Okay, this is not groundbreaking shit. That's just how receptors work. That model of how receptors work has been known since at least the 1960s. That's not the discovery that Linda Buck won the Nobel Prize for. She won the Nobel Prize for the discovery of the actual genes, the actual DNA sequences that coded for the proteins involved in detection of odors. Which is like a huge deal. That's why she won a Nobel Prize for it. We already knew how receptors work. That's all you're describing, dude. You're just describing how receptors work. Olfactory, like smell receptors, they work just like any other receptor. Like, the receptor is a protein that is shaped a particular way, and that's how it is selective for a certain thing, you know, where only a certain shape of molecule will be able to activate the receptor. That's just how receptors work, and olfactory receptors are no different in that regard, which is why that's not what she won the Nobel Prize for. She won the Nobel Prize for discovering the genes that coded for those olfactory receptors, which turn out to be like, I think they're like 7% of our DNA is coding for those receptors, those smell receptors, which is crazy. That's a lot. It's one of the biggest protein families, biggest gene families. It's pretty crazy. When she discovered the genes coding for those proteins, that obviously was a huge breakthrough in studying the sense of smell, which is why it was deemed worthy of a Nobel Prize.
The problem was no one knew the exact shape of the various proteins, so he searched for other proteins that may be similar, finding them in bacteria. This allowed him to
This is like a non sequitur. The part after so, it doesn't follow from the beginning of the sentence. He said, the problem was no one knew the exact shape of the various proteins, so he searched for other proteins that may be similar, finding them in bacteria. I don't see how one of those things leads to the other thing. If you don't know what the proteins are shaped like, then how would you even find them in bacteria if you don't even know what they look like? I feel like they knew the shape of the receptors, especially given that they had the DNA sequences for them. That's just complete gibberish, dude. I think maybe he's confused because a lot of times if you are studying a given protein or a given DNA sequence, you and I hope I explained this correctly. It's been a while, okay, and I have a BA, not a Bachelor of Science. Um, but you can take like if you're interested in studying the protein that a certain section of DNA codes for, you can kind of cut out that section of DNA and you can put it into something called a plasmid, which basically kind of puts it in a format that a bacteria can just take up from the environment, and then the bacteria will start to produce that protein that is coded for in that DNA sequence from the plasmid. And so then you can produce more of that protein and have it available to study it. I think maybe that's what he's talking about. And he just didn't understand what he was reading. I don't know. But I mean, that's a thing. But I don't see how it would be helpful to find similar proteins in bacteria. I don't see how that solves the problem of not knowing what exactly they look like in humans. That doesn't make any sense. Also, I find it fascinating that he supposedly did all of this, okay, and for some reason he didn't publish any of it. That's when I search for the man's name is Joel Bellinson, and when I search for his name on PubMed, I only get one result, and it's not about this. So he did all of this. So he supposedly says he did this work in finding similar proteins in bacteria, and you didn't publish any of it? How come? That's suspicious. That's weird.
Create a smell index, writing software algorithms to simulate the binding of odor molecules with proteins and using trial and error to fine-tune the output fragrances.
So you do all of this and you don't publish any of it. It's interesting. Seems like a lot of work to not even publish anything about it. But what do I know?
I caught up with Joel, who's now living in Uganda, to get some further background on how this came to be. Kit is out with a t-shirt bearing the brand of the logo. Joel dived into his background first.
I feel like a skunk is a bad, is not the best symbol to be using for this, where you're already fighting an uphill battle of public perception. You know, you might not want to remind people that there are bad smells that could be produced as well right out of the gate. But I mean, again, what do I know?
No, I came out of Stanford. First Harvard in chemistry, Stanford biochem and international relations.
Really? Because Stanford says that you have a BA in biology. It's a little bit different. Maybe you're saying biochemistry because you think that sounds more impressive. Why are you saying something different than the degree that Stanford says that you have?
And I had come out of a Nobel Prize winning lab. Paul Berg, who had invented recombinant DNA cutting.
You know, all like really big research universities have Nobel Prize winning labs, right? Like, it's not just Stanford. Like, I guess I wouldn't say this because I'm an honest person and it would be weird to say this. I mean, I come out of a Nobel Prize winning lab too. USC has had multiple Nobel Prize winners in chemistry, and yeah, so I guess I also come out of a Nobel Prize winning lab, and also I've been in a garage, so I'm also a car. So yeah.
And pasting, and I ended up getting involved with pioneering DNA writing and reading, synthesis and sequencing.
What are you talking about? No, you weren't. No, you weren't. You weren't pioneering. You have a BA in biology. I wouldn't even believe you if you had a Bachelor of Science in biology, but I especially don't believe you if all you have is a BA in biology. You don't even have a graduate degree in it. You were not pioneering DNA writing and reading, synthesis and sequencing. You just weren't. You just weren't. You just weren't. Just because you went to the same school where that work occurred does not mean that it's that you also did it. You know, and it works both ways. I'm not giving you credit for that groundbreaking research, but I'm also not holding you accountable for that fucking tree that you guys have. Okay? I still am traumatized by that fucking tree. I hate that tree. Sorry, I just had flashbacks to losing to Stanford by a field goal twice in my time at USC. That fucking tree, man. Your band sucks.
Friend's girlfriend had found those genes in rodents.
Your friend's girlfriend had found the genes in rodents. What does this have to do with you? Guess all I have to say is my ex-boyfriend's friend's college roommate's brother discovered those genes in monkeys. So what do you have to say about that? So I guess it's more impressive than yours. So guess it's a more convoluted relationship than yours was. So...
And Linda Buck, she won the Nobel Prize. And I leveraged her data and found the homologs in macaque monkeys first and then humans. And
what are you talking about? Linda Buck already found those things in humans. So why are you saying that you found them in humans? What do you mean you found homologs in humans? They already found the genes in humans. And really, they were what are you talking about? I don't understand what you're talking about here. And again, if any of this actually took place, why didn't you publish any of it? That's very weird that you would do this and not publish it. So you'll have to pardon my suspicions here.
We made 3-dimensional models of the receptors, and then we modeled how fragrance molecules would stimulate those receptors. And so that was how we indexed fragrances, since they're a collection of chemicals at different ratios that each interact with all the different receptors to varying degrees. And that became a way for indexing.
Using the likes of smell-o-vision for inspiration, Bellinson's idea then was to generate thousands of odours just by blending them with different proportions of 64 primary scents. Using this, the recipes could be encoded in files, and the chemical components, held in printer-like cartridges, could be combined and transmitted through a USB-powered desktop device, wafting them into the user's face on demand.
I don't believe you. Let's see the device then. Show us the thousands of scents. Let's see if it passes the smell test. Where is your published research on your groundbreaking 3D models of these proteins that, according to you, nobody knew the exact shape of prior to you doing this 3D model of them? Where is this published? Why would you do something so groundbreaking and not publish it? It's pretty weird. It's pretty weird that you didn't publish it.
After enticing various executives from Sega, NEC, Sprint, Transamerica and Bath and Body Works, offering knowledge of both tech and the world of fragrances, they formed DigiSense in February 1999 and got to work on developing their product. A product that needed to be both software and hardware.
Savor is a weird verb to use with something that you do not eat.
In form, although DigiSense really wanted to concentrate on the software with their
I'll bet they did.
main intention of developing a fully fragranced internet superhighway.
God, that sounds like a fucking nightmare.
Their idea was to develop this smell index they could license to websites and software developers whilst outsourcing the hardware manufacture to other companies. This would, for example, allow you to test perfumes online, get a whiff of banoffee pie from a food retailer, send a virtual bouquet of flowers, or even get a whiff of a fully interactive online world.
Okay, you barely even have to really think about this to understand why all 4 of those ideas are so fucking stupid and just fatally flawed. First of all, a perfume company is never in a million years going to provide you the exact formula of their product. They are never going to provide an exact formula of their product to a third-party software developer or or provide them with a recipe that can replicate their formula. That's never going to happen. They're not going to provide you with a database of proprietary fragrances for you to just have at your disposal. Absolutely not. That would never happen. It's so ridiculous. It's so concerning that you think that that is a possibility, that you think there is a snowball's chance in hell that that would ever happen. Like it really, like you really only have to think about this for like 5 seconds to understand how this is just a complete non-starter here. Furthermore, you know, there are thousands of ingredients that can be used in perfume, right? So how are you going to replicate that with just 64 primary scents? Like, I know you keep saying primary scents because you want us to think of them as primary colors, but that's not how the sense of smell works. It's not that simple. This is a chemical sense. So if you want to replicate thousands of scents, then you're just going to need thousands of chemicals. That's how it works. That's just how it works. I don't understand how it's not immediately obvious how this could not possibly work. I don't get it. I really don't get it. You would have to have thousands and thousands of these cartridges in order for it to work the way that you described. There's no way that you could try a bunch of perfumes. There's no way you could sample even one perfume, but let alone a bunch of them without having like thousands and thousands of these cartridges for it to even work. Okay, that's my first point. Second of all, I don't know what the hell banoffee pie is. It must be some weird British thing. I don't know. But what I'm going to say is, why would I ever in a million years want to smell a food that I cannot eat because it's not here? So either way, I'm going to have to either like go get it myself, or I'm going to have it delivered, or I'd have to like, I don't know, make it. And I have a sneaking suspicion that that the scent of it that was delivered to me is going to smell better than the actual product. You know, just based on the way that food companies handle their visual advertising, I have to assume that their smell marketing would not be any better. Third of all, I don't even want to see or hear a virtual online world, let alone smell it, so pass.
The fact that smell bypasses the conscious brain and communicates directly with the limbic system meant it could evoke emotions that were literally uncontrollable, a powerful tool to whoever wields it.
You keep listing very serious problems with this concept, but then you just kind of act like it's not an actual concern, is it? But like it is, though. Imagine if advertisers started using this on a widespread scale.
The team weren't stupid, they knew where...
Really? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like they were stupid. Seriously, they're stupid.
...the money lie if this thing was successful, but they also...
Right. But if you think that this could possibly be successful, you're stupid.
...knew it would be an uphill struggle to market successfully and without ridicule. Bellinson himself was quoted as saying, "There's something funny about putting a computer-controlled smell machine on your desktop."
Right. Did that not give you any hints as to your likelihood of success?
Which there very much is. Indeed, even the idea of your computer creating smells had already been spoofed online.
Right, because it is such a ridiculous concept that most people understand it to be a stupid idea and basically not possible.
The website realaroma.com had conceived of the raw HTML concept, Real Aroma Hypertext Markup Language, and even jested about a 3-vowel contraption that essentially was supposed to do the exact same thing that DigiSense were working on. They even had their own smell index, using hex codes akin to selecting colors for a web page. So,
right. That's because it is an inherently funny suggestion to suggest that you can just make thousands of scents from mixing a limited amount of fragrances as if it were red, green, and blue light or something. Like, you can make all kinds of sounds by mixing several sound waves and putting them on top of each other, which creates an overtone series, which is what gives like an instrument its timbre. It's a super complex superimposition of different harmonics. Or you can create millions and millions and millions of colors by mixing red, green, and blue light. That's not how smell works, though, because smell is a chemical detecting system. It is detecting chemicals that have completely different structures and properties and shapes. And just because it detects one chemical, it doesn't mean that the same receptor is going to detect another chemical. So you can't just duplicate thousands of scents from a limited set. Like, it doesn't work that way. That's why this idea is inherently funny. That's why it is a joke.
To combat this, they needed to first develop a vision, a credible vision, which meant they needed to deliver working examples and they needed to deliver the means for this to work.
That dog would probably be so disappointed and just like not fooled at all by this. Dog would be like, no, that doesn't smell anything like that. That smells completely different.
The first order of the day was to create a prototype, and by that, I mean something for people to look at in magazines, so they didn't think the whole thing was a joke. After all, nothing says we're serious more than
You sure about that one?
a Star Trek-style yacht to stick on your desk, especially a Star Trek-style yacht to stick on your desk that was called I Smell.
Why are you uncritically covering this if you seem to understand how stupid of an idea this is? Why would you use a skunk? How is that going to help you with this uphill battle? By reminding people of like how offensive smells can be.
Yes, Apple would be proud. Armed with this and a range of scents, DigiSense went about creating a hype train the world had never seen, nor
They should have gone about creating a working prototype instead of creating a hype train.
smelt, and the media absolutely lapped it up, from the general media to gaming publications like the official Sega Dreamcast magazine, who were concerned that people would start sending stink bombs via email. It seeped into every crevice it could find. In fact, it generated so much publicity that Wired magazine even created a scratch and sniff front cover for the occasion on their November 1999 issue, with the words "Smell the Future" over an armpit drawn by spumco.com, which is well worth checking out on the Internet Archive if you're not already familiar.
Yeah, it still smells.
I would not have guessed that Nostalgia Nerd was into that.
The article featured a detailed interview with Bellinson, Smith, and indeed Mark Cantor, who was keen to use the technology across the internet, synchronized with movies, videos, and music. Charles Platt, the interviewer, writes, Bellinson, who sounds edgy and looks sleep-deprived, has been pitching his new paradigm to me with the manic charisma of an infomercial host. The way he sees it, scentography is going to transform the entertainment media spectrum, all the way from web surfing to Hollywood movies. We're sitting in Bellison's immaculately renovated 1920s apartment in Oakland, California, overlooking a grand panorama of downtown and Lake Merritt, but no one's checking out the view. We move closer to an IBM ThinkPad that rests on an ornate glass top table. Smith rolls the track.
Oh, don't worry. See, this is in 1999. So glass top tables, for some reason, were really common. I don't know why. I don't know if it was like why were we doing all the glass top tables? Were we like really into fingerprints at the time or something? I don't what. Why were we doing the glass top tables? I didn't like those. But anyway, don't worry. It's super common back then.
Point, shifting the cursor arrow to a picture of some green grapes. He clicks on them. Beside the ThinkPad linked via serial cable sits a black plastic box 3 inches tall, 2 inches wide, and 5.
I thought it was supposed to be powered by USB, but I guess they have it connected via serial this time. So presumably, this thing must be working completely differently from how they were proposing it to work. They were proposing that it was going to work by USB. However, I suspect that it wouldn't have worked over USB. USB probably could not deliver enough power to heat up the fragrances It's interesting that this thing, they described it as being USB powered, but this thing's not USB powered. It's connected to the computer via a serial cable, which obviously like we don't really use very much anymore, except for like on, you know, like old peripherals and stuff. So it must be plugged into the wall, and then the data is being connected via the serial port. So again, so they're describing a completely different device when they're pitching it, and then the prototype is nothing like that. Now, let's take a listen to the way that this prototype is producing these scents, because it's interesting.
5 inches deep, about the size of an electric pencil sharpener. Somewhere inside, it has a little fan that starts whirring, drawing air in at the back and blowing it over tiny vials of oils that are being heated selectively in response to signals from the computer. The air picks up the oily fragrance and wafts it out through a 2-inch vent. I straighten up and give Bellinson and Smith an apologetic look. It smells like cheap perfume. Smith scrolls to a picture of oranges. He clicks on them. Once more, I breathe deeply. Orange peel, I report. My hosts relax in their chairs, looking immensely relieved.
Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking oils, fragrances. And I assure you, that's not how they're producing these fragrances, okay? It's not that, you lying sack of shit hater. No, they're not using that. This is done by very sophisticated 3D modeling of proteins based on the groundbreaking research by Linda Buck. And they simulated the protein folding up, and they simulated with a computer how the right molecules to fit into the proteins. And that's how they designed these very sophisticated scientific fragrance primary created fragrances. Okay, so it's not what you think it is, you lying hater. Okay, this is created by extremely sophisticated technology to create scent primaries, because you can create thousands of smells from just 64 scent primaries. And they created these by 3D modeling the proteins and seeing which molecules slotted into them. Okay, that's how. Nope. No.
Initiates a sequence of movie clips, and in a window on the screen we're transported to Oz. Dorothy, the lion, and the scarecrow are venturing into the forest, and its trees are not merely visible, but sniffable. Ah, Cantor exclaims, smell that cedar. And it's true, a cedar fragrance emerges from the little black box beside the computer.
Okay, first of all, isn't it apple trees in The Wizard of Oz? Not cedar? And we covered this already. It is not what you think it is, you lying hater. This was created by 3D modeling the proteins and seeing which molecules slot into the receptors to create scent primaries, to create thousands of fragrances accurately. It's very sophisticated, and it's not what you're saying that it is. It is much more sophisticated, okay? You lying absolute hater.
Now the Wicked Witch is mixing a poison potion over a crackling fire. Oh, that wood smoke, Cantor cries with delight. Indeed, the box emits a smoky tang without the smoke. So, by the end of '99, Digicent did at least have a mystery black box that looked nothing like their prototype, but did in fact emit smells.
Boy, if they could only have something that emitted smells and also looked like their prototype. This is hard, okay? What other thousands of fragrances could it produce?
In that session, 26 scents were tested, including Donkey Kong's bananas, with Platt commenting that the smells cleared pretty quickly, allowing for new fragrances to be delivered in fairly rapid succession.
Hang on a second, let me just do some quick math here. So they were saying it could create thousands of fragrances. Carry the one. Okay, maybe check my work here, but my tabulations here show that 26 is actually 974 less than 1000. So, and we don't know what all 26 were, but the ones we do know that they mentioned were banana, orange, grapes, smoke, and cedar. So those scents were produced by warming a vial of oil and wafting air across the vial of oil. Now, I don't want to be a hater here, but kind of sounds like you're just using essential oils to produce the aromas. I'm not saying you definitely didn't do 3D modeling of the proteins to find out what chemicals went into which receptor and, you know, doing all your protein structures from each individual thousand of genes and 3D modeling it and seeing which molecules slot in there. And I'm not saying you definitely didn't do that. But what I am saying is that if that is true, if that's truly the process by which you arrived at this, it's kind of sad that it took you like however many hours and hours and hours of research and like data processing and like computational power to do something to create an experience that basically any 2-bit doTERRA or Young Living Hun could also an experience they could also create if you gave them about 5 minutes and their starter kit. They could do all of those fragrances just fine, and it would be a lot cheaper and faster. So either you are a lying sack of shit who's just blowing warm air across vials of essential oils and claiming that you did 3D modeling of the protein structures of the receptors, or you arrived at this demonstration in the most unbelievably convoluted, inefficient, wasteful process possible. And I'm not sure which one is worse, but it's starting to sound like maybe this process was not as sophisticated as you're suggesting that it was. It's starting to sound like maybe you are not telling the truth.
Cantor, who was working alongside the team at that point, notes, "Luckily we have a world-class sensory psychologist on staff who'll be able to work out exactly the median time frame that is appropriate for refreshing the nostril."
I mean, frankly, that sounds like something that you could just work out by trial and error, but whatever.
I asked Joel for more details on how all this worked.
64 basic primaries, and they had a 10x range. We wish we could have done a bigger range. I just figured, if we can at least get to market, even with the Atari, we'll eventually get to the more sophisticated. So from that, the combinatorics is probably, countless, but it certainly could make thousands of recognizably different fragrances. I can't say it was
recognizably different fragrances. Notice how he doesn't say like thousands of like identifiable fragrances. He says thousands of recognizably different fragrances, right? That's because smell doesn't work that way. It doesn't work the way that vision works. Like, yes, there it has to do with like combinations, but like just because you have 64 different chemicals doesn't mean that you can accurately replicate thousands of fragrances. I mean, you might be able to make thousands of different smells, but it doesn't mean that any of those things will smell like anything real. Because when you smell something like vanilla, or when you smell something like a piece of fruit or a flower, there's gonna be a few compounds that are like the majority of what you're smelling, but just within that one flower or that one teaspoon of real vanilla extract, there are going to be like hundreds and hundreds of different aromatic, like different volatile compounds that are responsible for creating that rich, very identifiable scent. It's extremely complex. The main thing that gives vanilla its scent and its taste. Like the taste of vanilla is mostly smell. Vanillin is what gives it the majority of its scent. But if you smell vanillin, it suggests vanilla. It smells kind of like vanilla, but real vanilla smells very different. It smells much more rich and complex, whereas like vanillin kind of sounds like it smells like a caricature of vanilla. That's not how it works. You can't just mix cedar and orange peel and create a third fragrance. It doesn't work that way. It's not like we only have 64 different receptors in our noses. We already established that we have thousands of them. Thousands. So to suggest that you're going to be able to replicate that many different fragrances when you're only operating on 64 of them is pretty ridiculous, because every compound is going to have its own specific level of stimulation on each of those 1,000 receptors. You know, some receptors, it won't stimulate them at all. Some of them it will stimulate a little bit. Some of them it will stimulate very strongly. And that whole kind of fingerprint that it's going to create is going to be the reason that you pick up that very specific smell, where it's very specifically identifiable. I don't know. It's so stupid. It's such a stupid idea. There's no way that it would work. There's no way that anyone would want it, even if it did work. Keep in mind, I think that this thing was going to cost like $200 and the cartridges were going to cost $50. I'm sorry. No one's going to pay $50 for more cartridges, dude. No, because people are going to try this out once and then they're going to be like, okay. And then they're never going to use it again because it's a gimmick.
Perfect. I can't say we were able to elegantly differentiate between all kinds of different high-end fragrances. I would say it was more cartoonish than elegant, but still good enough to set the vibe.
And yet, you're suggesting that you could sample a perfume from your home. No perfume manufacturer is going to let you represent their fragrance, as you say, a cartoon of it. No, it has to be exact. But you can't do that from 64 cents. It's such a stupid idea. It would never work. Why are we covering this? Why are we talking about this guy? Did he pay you to talk about this? What does this have to do with 9/11?
The 64 primaries Joel mentions are the base chemicals which can be combined to produce thousands of fragrances. He showed me
But they can't though. He just told you that they can't.
how this would work with the Industrial Design version 2, which was ready before the start of the millennium.
This is the industrial design of what it was going to look like. Sorry if it's a little dusty. The goal was to jam then the functional one into this form factor. Being this blue cartridge, each one of these ridges was a different element. Activates via piezoelectric, like an inkjet printer. So the top of the cartridge had piezoelectric heads attached to a circuit board, and then the blower in the top would suck it up and mix them and blow towards you. It would call forth the appropriate elements of the cartridge in the right ratios to be able to reproduce the thousands of smells that our cartridge could do.
How can you possibly say your cartridge could do that when you've only ever shown it doing 26 by my count?
These early prototypes show the circular cartridge to the right and the bellows that would waft the fragrance out. Pretty neat. So, above all, it's clear that
Oh my god, is that Tommy Tallarico? Shut up.
Sense meant business, and they intended to be taken seriously.
I mean, obviously they want to be taken seriously if Tommy Tallarico is talking about it. Oh my god. It's so great that I got to work with Tommy Tallarico to create the eye smell. Our mothers are very proud.
Smells, it stinks. There's odor that comes out of it depending on where you are in the game. It's like smell-o-vision, right?
In early 2000, Victor Lucas would cover this emerging technology in an episode of Electric Playground, with Joel on hand to demonstrate some of the scents. You can even see a copy of that Wired magazine in the foreground.
Where?
Only the smell of gunfire.
You have the smell of gunfire.
Only the smell of gunfire.
You have the smell of gunfire.
Only the smell of gunfire.
You have the smell of gunfire.
an admittedly pretty easy scent to replicate. Also, where the fuck is your prototype? Haven't you had a year to work on this? Where is it? Why are you handing out sticks? What is this? Where's the device?
Yeah, here, take a little whiff of that.
Oh yeah. Well, not that I would know.
Maybe you want to smell a swamp instead.
Now, clearly there was no prototype on hand that day.
Seems like there was no prototype that existed at all. If you can't even bring it for a television appearance, what the fuck? Where is it?
Instead, Joel just had a collection of fragranced sticks for
What is the point of this? Jesus Christ, any Young Living or doTERRA hun could have done this.
folks to inhale. Unfortunately, if they wanted to make an impact, they would
Wow, seems like he's really enjoying himself.
have to do more than that, and not just promises of a device by the end of the year.
Except it seems like that's all this was.
That's in part because by this point, they also had 3 rivals. Remember, this was still the .com boom, and if there was an idea, you'd be sure that people would jump on it like flies.
Yeah, even if it was a stupid idea. I want to know what this has to do with 9/11, because from where I'm standing, the reason that this failed is obvious, and it does not require any additional explanation. So I'm hoping this is a good explanation.
Shitfest.
Banana.
Why are they standing so close together? Does he like him?
Oh yeah. Whoa, yeah, that's
Sweet.
powerful, sweet
This
banana.
is concentrated.
Okay.
Then we give you pizza.
Even an artificially fragranced shitfest.
Why are they standing so close together?
The first of those was AromaJet, a Dallas company that was focusing on fragrancing video games, albeit with a rather strange device worn around the neck.
Boy.
There was a company from Georgia, Trisense, who were promising to ship a simpler implementation with an example given by the company's founder that it could simulate the odor of a brand new car, but it couldn't simulate the precise aroma of a 2000 Nissan Altima.
I mean, unfortunately, the reason that I was absent from, YouTube the first couple months of this year is my car. I drive a Kia Soul EV, and the traction motor, which is the main motor that makes the car go, went out in my car, and so I replaced the traction motor myself. Yeah, I'm more of a grease monkey than you'd expect. It was a very long and involved project though, and so I had to rent cars several times. Yeah, at the Hertz location that I went to, guy at the counter, I thought like we were flirting. Like I figured like maybe he like wants to have sex with me, but then like he put me in a Nissan Altima, so like I guess not.
But it was DigiSense leading the way, and as the year progressed, things
Leading the way where?
started to look even more enticing. In May 2000, it was announced that DigiSense would be partnering with eCandy.com to provide visitors with a total shopping experience, including the sweet smells of the online merchandise. With Rani Ali Ahmed, co-founder of eCandy.com, stating, "Imagine yourself walking into a candy store. The first thing you noticed is the smell."
What? No, I wouldn't. I mean, does a candy store smell that intensely? I feel like the first thing I would notice walking into a candy store would be like the colors and all the brightly colored candies. Candy's like usually wrapped in plastic and stuff. It's not like walking into like a Mrs. Fields or walking into like a Cinnabon. I don't know. I always imagine that like, when dogs talk to each other, they're probably just like, they probably ask each other like, why are humans always looking at everything? Every time my human takes me for a walk, my humans always gotta look at every single thing, everything. There'll be a door, they gotta open the door and look at what's behind it. They just, they can't even decide if they're interested, in a potential partner without like looking at their butt. Why do they look at their butt? Why don't they sniff their butt? Like, it's so weird. Humans are so weird.
Later that month, Procter & Gamble then announced a research and distribution alliance with DigiSense, giving access to P&G's research methods so it could gauge consumer reaction to adding smell of a product or the effect of including scent with a movie, game, or email.
We had relationships with Kraft Foods, Procter & Gamble, and Unilever. Procter & Gamble is going to distribute the device, One of their demands was that we do all the ruggedization testing, which turned out to be very expensive because all those chemicals, they cross-react with plastic, and it's really a combinatoric problem. And we got through it.
By this point,
Do you just say the word combinatoric about everything? Procter and Gamble, I don't know if you know this about Procter and Gamble. This is kind of like a little known fact, but Procter and Gamble is a massive company. So the fact that Procter and Gamble was unwilling to invest or pay for the ruggedization process with you, that should be a red flag. Because if Procter and Gamble thought this was going to go somewhere, they would have invested in you. They would have put an investment in so that you could complete that ruggedization, because they would be like, well, it costs money, but we'll make a lot more money because this will sell. We'll sell so many of these. But clearly they did not believe in your product if they would not even pay for that, right? Because it's not an issue of like how much funding they have, because Procter and Gamble has enough money to pay for that. They have way more than enough money. Procter and Gamble probably wouldn't even notice the money required for ruggedization funding here. They probably wouldn't even notice it was missing for at least like a couple of quarters. I feel like that should have been a sign for you. The fact that they were not willing to even cover that, because clearly they knew, or at least they suspected, this was not going to sell. If they really thought that this was going to be a successful product, they would have just invested the money to develop it, but they didn't.
over 2,000 game developers alone had also downloaded the DigiSense software development kit, allowing them to integrate the technology with their latest titles.
So we had partnerships with Microsoft for the Xbox and Sony for PlayStation 2. What did we do with like Lara Croft?
No, you didn't. You didn't. You just didn't. Okay? You didn't.
Yeah, when your animals were sometimes stalking her and you could smell them. It was so exciting.
This is so stupid. Okay, so smelling an animal that is stalking you? No. Thinking about like, okay, if I'm out on a hike, right? Let's suppose it's nighttime. There is a 0% chance that I'm going to notice an animal that is stalking me by smelling it. Smell has a 0% chance of being the sense that is going to alert me to that animal's presence. No, I'm going to either hear it or I'm going to see it. Like I'm going to hear, a rustling, or I will see something move. Especially because I'm a human and I'm not a dog. This is so stupid. If this device is causing you to smell an animal that is tracking you in the game, then that's not realistic. That's not real. That wouldn't happen. That's not how humans locate a threat, by smelling it. Our sense of smell is just not that sensitive. It doesn't have that kind of resolution. Like, I would never be like, oh, I think I smell a mountain lion behind me. No, I would hear it at best. And plus, no, I wouldn't, because the mountain lion can smell me and the mountain lion can hear me many, many, many times farther away. So by the time I'm hearing the mountain lion or seeing the mountain lion, it's going to be the mountain lion's choice whether I die or not. So, but what I'm saying is, smell would never be the thing that alerts me to a dangerous animal stalking me. So I don't know why he's suggesting here that would be like a realistic addition to the game. Like, no, that would almost be like immersion breaking, because you have this weird smell element that wouldn't actually exist. Think about what you are saying, for the love of God.
To see anything, movies, video games, commercials with scent.
Real networks also
Having commercials with scent sounds like a fucking nightmare.
jumped on board, allowing the Real Player software to be rigged up to dish out free
Real Player, oh my God, what a throwback.
fragrances on demand and even synchronize with media.
We added scent tracks to movies like Saving Private Ryan, and soldiers are walking through the tall, wild fields. You're smelling, the grass, and then you start smelling something nasty, what turned out to be the smell of a dead body.
The idea that anyone would ever want the smell of a corpse in their home is so absolutely batshit crazy. Okay. We were just talking about how smell has a connection directly to the limbic system, that emotional center that is involved in intense emotions. The idea that you would just casually want to smell a dead body the idea that you would describe this as being remotely desirable, the only thing I can think is that you are very fortunate to have never smelled that before. Because that's the only explanation. Because if you had ever smelled that before, you would never suggest this. Because that would be associated with such a level of trauma. And smelling it again, you would never, ever, 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 ever want to smell that again because of that limbic connection. A scent like that, it's able to be such a sucker punch of a very intense emotion. I'm not saying you're less of a person if you've never smelled that before, but you're very fortunate to have never smelled it before, and that you must not have, or else you would not suggest this so flippantly. Like, holy shit. I cannot... Is this supposed to be a selling point? I don't know how it's not obvious why this product failed, but I'm interested to see what the hell 9/11 has to do with it. Because to me, the reason this product failed seems pretty obvious. There are many, many reasons. There's the fact that this product, it doesn't seem like it ever existed, for one thing. It doesn't seem like you ever had an actual prototype. It seems like all we saw was like wafting essential oils at people and little sticks of fragrances, right? So it doesn't seem like it actually ever worked. It doesn't seem like you ever actually built a prototype of it. And even if it did work, which it never would have, it doesn't seem like anyone would ever want this. And it doesn't seem like you understood what people wanted, because people do not want to smell a dead body. Ever. Ever. There are some things that you don't need to smell. There are some things that do not enhance your experience. There are some scents you don't want in your home. And this just would not, there's no way for this to work in any type of desirable way. It's so stupid. Why are we talking about this like this was not the stupidest idea ever? Why? And how can there possibly... I don't see how it needs an explanation for why it failed. The reason it failed is obvious. So I'm interested to see where we're going with this.
It really looked like this was going to be a thing, alongside all the other interactive peripherals that were becoming hot news.
But it wasn't, though.
Anyone remember the force feedback mouse?
Also failed and did not require another explanation for why it failed, did it?
Working polished prototypes developed by Gene Machines were appearing at trade shows, and the general public were queuing to get a literal whiff of the action. Did you say
it doesn't seem like they were, though.
Were even hoping their competition would ramp up. They envisaged an ecosystem of speaker-sized products they dubbed as Reekers that could have their smell index license to run on them and synthesize with competitor products as well. Yahoo Internet Life even published a special feature on the new ways to interact with the web: smell, touch, and taste. And as you can imagine, basic human instincts were a driving force here, something that Bellinson mentioned in our interview.
The adult industry was all over it too, by the way. From literal body odors to, some of the performers have names that sound like candy and fruit. It was fun.
Listen, I know some of you guys are freaks out there, but I cannot imagine that being that big of a sales driver. I can't imagine the demographic that wants to smell their porn being that large, and I think that would be a bad thing to have associated with your product, because once your product is like associated with like a salacious adult purpose, that's going to be the only thing it's associated with. And then people who don't want it for that purpose are not going to buy it, because then everyone who hears that you bought one is going to think that that's why you bought it. Like, if someone's like, oh, that's not why I bought it. It'd be like, okay, sure. See what I mean? See how it's like, it kind of invalidates any other purpose for it, because everyone's like, yeah, but like I that's why you got it, right? So that's going to be the only thing that people latch on to about it. And the other thing I would say is that, like, yeah, the porn industry will try anything, because, like, it's not like it's gonna tarnish their reputation to use a new gimmick or whatever. Like, sure, they'll try it, why not? So I don't see how that would be that big of a sales driver in the first place. I don't see how that is like an endorsement of your product. You could have any stupid device or whatever, like they'll be like, all right, we'll try it out. So dumb. What a nightmare. Not in a million years. Absolutely not. Ew.
We are unleashing this whole new thing. It was like giving Jimi Hendrix an electric guitar.
Being able to smell your porn is like giving Jimi Hendrix an electric guitar. How?
With talk of sweat and pheromones being pumped out of the humble little eye smell box, things were really hotting up. Promises were made that iSmell would be ready by early 2001, with a price tag of under $200, and scent cartridges.
Promises were made it would be ready by early 2001. For no particular reason, I'm going to just point out that early 2001 would not include September of 2001.
Is posited to be available for under $50 each. Each cartridge
No one's going to pay $50 for one of these cartridges, dude.
is expected to last a few months, which could turn out to be quite an expensive gimmick, especially with special cartridges for different experiences.
But I thought you could create thousands of scents from 64 primary scent thingies.
If you wanted to get fine-tuned, you could have specific cartridges for different applications. And then you
No. I thought you could create thousands of fragrances from 64 scent primaries.
want to just do a first-person shooter, well, you're going to need a hell of a lot more of, gunpowder, like that. Or if you're going to do a racing game, you're going to need a lot more of racing-related smell.
Okay, that kind of would add in like a little bit of a health concern component then, because a lot of smells that you would associate with cars are not particularly good for your health to be inhaling. Like gasoline, burnt rubber, the scent of oil. Those are not things that are considered healthy to be inhaling. So that would kind of add like a bit of a health concern to this product.
Of course, you might expect knockoff carts to also appear for cheaper, just like with inkjet ink.
No, I wouldn't, because no one wants this. People don't create knockoffs of products that nobody wants. They create knockoffs of products that are in high demand and have good brand recognition.
But the dot-com bubble was starting to burst, and DigiSense knew they needed more money.
So we survived the dot-com crash, actually. We raised a significant amount from two of the fragrance and flavor chemical companies, Quest and Givaudan. They put in $5 million each. We decided to do strategic tie-ups with the chemical makers, and that kept us going after the crash.
Still, by April 2001, there were problems. The Toronto Star ran a headline, "Investors smell a rat at DigiSense." It seemed to the media, at least, that investors were starting to question whether sniffing your computer was the way forward.
Interesting concern to have.
Oh yeah, that's a swamp. Here, you have that one.
The reality, according to Joel, was a little different. Although most of their initial funding was gone, on paper things still looked good. They had secured some 5,000 deals with websites, software, and video game developers. The SDK had been downloaded over 5,000 times.
Wait a minute. I would hope that if you had 5,000 deals, that would result in at least 5,000 downloads of your SDK. Otherwise, doesn't seem like anyone intends to do any development. Just because someone downloads, this is so stupid. This doesn't mean anything.
And interest was strong.
And Sony had told us their experience every time they launched a new category of consumer electronics device. They said, look, it costs $100 million no matter what. You guys haven't raised nearly enough. We had raised $25 million to date. They said, you're going to need at least another $100 million. You should put this device in 1 million people's households for free.
Who at Sony told you this? Sony has never put a product in a million people's households for free. What are you talking about? You're making this up. Also, how would $100 million be enough to put a device in 1 million people's houses for free? Also, 1 million people is probably larger than your potential market. 1 million people were not going to buy this in the first place. So if you give it away for free to 1 million people, you're not going to have any sales at all if you were going to have any in the first place. This is so stupid. Why are you making this up? And
so we're, all right, we need to do a much bigger financing than we had planned. And we went out and we did it, and we lined it up. Goldman Sachs was leading, and Givaudan, who had already invested, was going to be the follow-on. And Unilever was going to come in, and each of the major players was going to put up $50 million. In order to get it done, we had to get through our due diligence. With Givaudan, now they wanted to go through a much more serious due diligence process than for the initial investment they had made, which is what eventually bit us in the ass.
Right there. All right? He just said this. He said it was the due diligence. They had to do a more serious due diligence, which suggests to me that they looked into it, realized that they didn't even have a prototype, didn't have anything remotely close to a prototype, because this primary scent thing doesn't work. All they had was a fan that blows on essential oils. So they did their due diligence and they were like, you don't have anything. You have nothing. We're not investing in this. You don't have anything. There's nothing to invest in here. Okay? It would seem that, and he just said it. He just said that due diligence was what bit them in the ass, right? He just said that.
The CEO at the time was facing a challenge from the CFO, who basically said, hey, when we spun out of Hoffman LaRoche, this was the very first investment that was made, was into DigiSense. It's amazing. Everything went great in this due diligence, but that was a big risk we took. It might not have gone well. We should have done this first. Bad protocol. And so the CEO was humiliated. And so
I don't believe you. I think that what happened was they did their due diligence, realized that you don't even have anything remotely close to a prototype. You don't have anything that is remotely like what you're describing. All you have is promises about this thing that's going to create thousands of fragrances from 64 scent primaries, and they realized that you had nothing. You don't have anything that resembles what you're describing. And even if you did have something that resembled what you were describing, even if this worked exactly the way that you were describing it, nobody would want this. Nobody wants a machine that can help you smell a dead body when you're watching Saving Private Ryan. Nobody wants that. Did you do any market research? Because that's what probably happened here. They looked at the fact that you didn't even have a prototype that was even remotely close to ready, and they also probably conducted some market research on whether people were going to want this. That was part of the due diligence. And they were like, oh my God, no, we're not investing any further in this. That's it. We're done. We're out. But it seems like, since we haven't talked about 9/11 yet, it seems like you're going to have a different explanation, when to me, it seems like this has been more than satisfactorily explained.
He dropped out, which killed us.
In a 2001 interview, Joel commented, "We don't fit very easily into what people are funding. We're basically trying to position ourselves for a relaunch. We've mentioned that I smell could be used in cars or even for medical aromatherapy purposes. But around them, companies were still dropping like flies and investors were still nervous. Despite this, they did manage to secure more funding. At least they would have if it hadn't been for other world events."
That summer, we were trying to get it restarted, because we had run out of cash. We were going to have to do a new financing on harsh terms. And that was okay. Anything to survive, right? Morgan Stanley had someone who was a super big fan, and he was determined to recapitalize us. And so we were flying back and forth to New York from the Bay Area. They never quite had the right people in the room. Now, here's the wild thing. My business partner's family was going through some real difficulties. I wanted to help him out. He and I have been best friends for a long time. So I canceled all of our meetings and we went down to Florida.
You canceled your meetings. You canceled your meetings. You didn't have meetings because you canceled them.
Florida to help his family. It culminated on the same day as 9/11. A couple months later, I was like, you know what? Weren't we supposed to be meeting with Morgan Stanley? Let me check our calendar. We had 2 tentative dates set, and both at 9 a.m., both on the 50th floor of the World Trade Center, one on September 10th, one on September 11th. The irony is, had we gone on the 10th, we would most certainly have died, because we always were trying to save money and not waste money at hotels. So we would have flown back from Newark to San Francisco, and that was the flight that.
What do you mean? Are you suggesting that you would have been on flight 93? Do if you had a meeting on September 10th, it doesn't save you any money on hotels to have a meeting on September 10th and fly back in the morning on 9/11. You still have to stay overnight because that flight took off in the morning. So I don't see how that had anything to do with saving money on a hotel. If you wanted to save money on a hotel, you probably would have flown back that afternoon. If your meeting was in the morning on September 10th, you would have flown back in the evening, because that would be easy and that would save you money on a hotel. It wouldn't save you money on a hotel to fly back on September 11th, because you'd have to stay overnight on the 10th. So what are you talking about with saving money here? If you wanted to save money, you would have flown back the evening of September 10th, right? Right, because there are 10 jillion flights between Newark and San Francisco or San Jose or Oakland. You could have flown into any of those places, because there's probably 20 million flights between those 2 locations. Furthermore, even if your plan was actually going to be to fly back on September 11th, are you suggesting to me that the only flight between Newark and the Bay Area was flight 93? I feel like there are so many flights between those 2 locations. So what makes you think that you were going to be on flight 93? Furthermore, even accepting all of that, right, but you didn't. You canceled your meetings because your friend needed help. That had nothing to do with 9/11. You did not know 9/11 was going to happen. I'm sorry. I just don't find this type of speculation. Who cares? What are you talking about? Why are you trying to insert yourself into this tragedy? You didn't have anything to do with it. You didn't even realize it until 2 months later that the meetings that you had canceled because your friend's family needed help, you canceled the meetings yourself. You chose to cancel the meetings independent of anything happening in September. Okay, even if the attacks had not happened, you still would have canceled those meetings. You said that. You said you canceled them before that. So I don't see why you are bringing 9/11 into this. What are you talking about? What are you talking about?
The passengers crashed in Pennsylvania. Had we done it on September 11th, We would have been there when the plane hit the building on the, on the floor, pretty much that it hit. But
No, the plane crashed much higher than the 50th floor. You would have been fine, most likely.
Not that many people got killed on that floor. As it turned out, some of our bankers did.
No, they did not. No, they did not. No, they did not. This was a huge story at the time. And I don't know why you think no one will remember it. This was a huge story at the time because Morgan Stanley was the biggest tenant of the World Trade Center. But Morgan Stanley, despite the size of their workforce in the World Trade Center, they lost 13 employees when you kind of would have expected them to lose many more. They lost 13 employees. One was a vice president. One of them was an assistant president. And then the remaining employees either worked in their security department, and likely as a result of that being their job, potentially lost their lives as heroes, helping other employees to get out of the building because they were performing their duties as working in the Department of Security at Morgan Stanley. And then the remaining employees were electricians. There weren't any bankers. There were no bankers killed at Morgan Stanley in the 9/11 attacks. So I don't know what you're talking about with this, but no Morgan Stanley bankers were killed in the 9/11 attacks. It was a vice president, an assistant president, and then electricians and people who worked in the security department at Morgan Stanley. This was a huge news story, so I don't know why you think you can get away with this, but Morgan Stanley did not lose any bankers on 9/11. You are lying about this because I guess you want to make this the excuse for why your product failed, but your product failed because of that due diligence. You just said that because that due diligence revealed that you didn't even have a product, that you had clearly not done any market research, that this product would not work in the way that you described. That's why it failed. It has nothing to do with 9/11, and how dare you try to blame it for it? You are making it up. You are making this up. I don't know why you're lying through your teeth about this, but you are, okay? It's so bizarre. I can't believe that the Nostalgia Nerd applied no fact-checking or critical thinking to this, that he's just like, oh yeah, I guess it failed because of 9/11. I guess the stupid smell kit failed because of 9/11. What?
So that was traumatizing for our champion who was pushing for the recap.
Was it?
So since several of his buddies had died, everything was...
I'm not saying that several of his buddies might not have died. I'm saying that his buddies were not bankers. They were not bankers because there were not any Morgan Stanley bankers killed in the 9/11 attacks. They lost 13 employees and none of them were bankers.
Up in the air after that. So 9/11 was...
Also, are you suggesting to me that the blood-sucking corporation Morgan Stanley would just be too traumatized to continue working after the September 11th attacks? Because if you prompt me with what's the first thing, name me some companies that come to mind when you think of blood-sucking, avarice-soaked, unscrupulous corporation, I'd be like, Amazon, Morgan Stanley, JP Morgan Chase, come on. Most importantly, they did not lose any bankers, so I don't know why you're making this up. I guess because you're too embarrassed about your product failing.
Really what put the final kibosh on us.
It's pronounced kibosh.
Maybe this is a sign. Dexter and I running full blast since the late 80s. And
maybe your sign was the constant ridicule you were getting and the fact that upon completing due diligence upon you, no one wanted to invest in you anymore. Maybe your sign should have been that this product is so obviously fucking stupid. Maybe your sign should have been that your prototype doesn't work, that you don't even have a prototype. All you have is a mock-up of it and some essential oils that you waft at people's faces. That should have been your fucking sign, dude. This isn't a sign. You canceled those meetings. You canceled those meetings, just a coincidence that they happen to be on 9/11. Some people have meetings on 9/11. You know, you don't notice when you have a meeting on September 12th, do you? No, it's just... I hate when people do this shit. We're like, oh, it's a sign from the universe. No, it's just a coincidence. They happen all the time. Coincidences happen all the time. They happen all the time. And that's it. It's not a sign from the universe. You canceled the meetings. So if you cared that much about this product, you should not have canceled those meetings. And no, you would not have been killed as a result of it. You wouldn't. You wouldn't have. No, you wouldn't have. No, you wouldn't have. Your story doesn't make any sense. This just sounds like you're making up this dramatic story because you think no one's going to fact check you on it. It seems like you are a compulsive liar.
Just said, you know what? Maybe it's time to take a break.
By the end of 2001, the company was disbanded and the stink dream was no more. I asked Joel what he might have done differently and whether...
It's so ridiculous that they're actually asserting, or at least suggesting, if they're not coming out and saying it, that this product like would have succeeded if 9/11 hadn't happened. No. He titled this video, this tech ended for the worst reason, right? So he's suggesting it ended because of 9/11. No, it didn't. It ended because it was fucking stupid and because the people who were going to invest in it did due diligence and they were like, oh, hell no. And then he canceled his meetings. It seems like it didn't work. It didn't succeed because it's fucking stupid and it didn't work as described. I just can't, I don't understand because clearly Nostalgia Nerd is accepting this narrative, right? If he titled the video that and then put the Twin Towers in the fucking thumbnail. Really?
May have helped the company.
If I had to do anything differently, I would have gone with a simpler device and not try to be as ambitious. That would be our main critique. But nonetheless, even though we were aiming too high, it was coming together. And unfortunately...
How?
With that boardroom battle at Givaudan, that was just a blow from which we didn't end up recovering.
Wait, so was it the due diligence or was it 9/11?
Just like DigiSense, the other products really failed to come to any sort of fruition as well.
Oh, did their bankers get killed in the September 11th attacks too?
The demand and the money simply weren't there, although...
Right. The demand and the money simply weren't there. So why are you saying that September 11th is why this failed? Why?
Aromajet is still listed on the Microfab Technologies website, and Trisense did eventually test launch their Scent Dome. It was tested by ISP Telewest in 2004. The dome could create 60 different smells and used codes embedded in an email or web page to produce them. But the funky little device had no way to waft scent towards the user, and it never really got past the testing stage. Since then, various companies have tried to do the same, including integrations with VR, which arguably would be pretty neat.
No, it wouldn't, because that would require VR to be pretty neat, and VR is fucking stupid, and nobody seems to understand that. Nobody wants it. Nobody wants it.
And in fact, Sony just this year announced conceptual technology to allow gamers to smell their games.
Sony is introducing Smell-O-Vision at the Consumer Electronics Show in Vegas this week. The goal is to make gaming as immersive for players as possible.
Right. I don't want to smell that.
It seems then that this is something that just isn't going away.
Yeah, well, it seems like it's not taking off either, so I don't know. Maybe 9/11 happened again, I guess. 9/11's just taking all the Smell-O-Vision products.
Which is a blessing and a curse. A blessing because it would be incredibly cool in some titles. Imagine it in Alien Isolation. You could tell by smell if the alien was near. You'd even be able to know what the alien smelled like.
I don't want to know that.
Or imagine having to mask odors in Hitman to prevent detection. But it could also be a curse. Can you imagine it being built into your phone and serving adverts? You'd be sitting there at a bus stop and suddenly get a whiff of Mark Zuckerberg's beard as an unwelcome advert seeped out of your pocket. I, for one, am grateful that it didn't get that far.
Yeah.
I like to control the fragrances around me if I can.
As do most people.
However, it could have been cool.
No, it wouldn't have.
And regardless, the technology behind DigiSense didn't go to waste.
We started another company. We used some of what we had learned with DigiSense on chemical informatics, and we used AI and designed new drugs against malaria and African sleeping sickness.
Which drugs? What drug could you have possibly developed that would not have resulted in a single published piece of research? No, you didn't. You are so full of fucking bullshit. You're so full of bullshit, Joel Bellinson. You haven't developed a drug because you know what? When you develop a drug, you publish research. So why isn't your name on any research that I could find on PubMed? Why do you only have one paper associated with you and none of it has anything to do with anti-malarials? You're such a fucking liar. I'm sorry, this is making me so mad. You're a liar. You are a liar. You're a fraud. You're a grifter. You haven't developed shit. Stop saying that you developed drugs. If you had developed even a single drug, you would have published research, and you don't have anything. You don't have shit. You don't have shit. You know what else this guy has developed? He developed this app that you could buy for $5.50 that would import your DNA data from 23andMe, and it would predict if you were gay from your DNA, even though it's not something that can be clearly identified from genetics. Like, research was overwhelmingly clear that, like, it's not a concrete thing that you can predict from genetics. Oh. And also, this guy lives in Uganda. You know where the Kill the Gays bill is? And he's doing this shit? You're a fraud. All right? Anyone who had, like, a good understanding of genetics and, you know, social decency would not be creating a fucking app like that and charging people money for it. What are you doing? You're a fraud, Joel Bellinson.
That took me to where I'm speaking to you from in Uganda. Why Uganda? Well, the chief engineer of Double Twist was a Ugandan. So when I had discovered these drugs, he hooked me up with the ministry.
You didn't discover drugs. Where's the paper? Where's the paper? How can you possibly discover a drug and you don't publish anything? You're a fucking liar. You're a fraud. You are a liar.
Ministry of Healthcare, the head of the World Bank for East Africa bumped into me, recognized me from the news, and gave my name to the prime minister, and they appointed me an advisor to the president of Uganda for life science and agribusiness. And so it came back and forth, and then they said, hey, why are you wasting your life in North America? They've done everything they need to do. We have lots of unsolved problems. We need someone to come here, think outside of the box. Look, you're not married, you don't have kids. Come here. So I moved here full time in 2012. And I've subsequently used that same methodology for my current company that I have a partner with in Belgium, a Genomatrix, where we have digitized the sense of taste. And we work with food and beverage companies in Europe and Asia, helping them reformulate their product to accommodate different dietary niches, either for health reasons or ethical reasons.
Sometimes you just have to let go of something for it actually to become what it needs to be.
What? How is that your takeaway? Yeah, so he was in Uganda when he developed that little app for, predicting if you're gay from your genes. That's interesting. I'm not going to expand on that any further. I'm just going to say that that's interesting. That's real interesting. It's real interesting that the Nostalgia Nerd didn't cover that angle either, because I guess he doesn't Google the people that he's covering and featuring for like 5 seconds. Doesn't take the 5 seconds to type their name into Google.
Till next time, I've been Nostalgia Nerd. Toodaloo.
That is such a terrible video. You should be embarrassed that you don't take 5 seconds to research the people that you feature on your channel, and it's really embarrassing that you just kind of don't. It seems like you feel a little bit of critical thinking coming on there, but you don't. Then you don't continue with it. You don't take it to its conclusion, do you? What the fuck? Such an easy thing to look up. You could have just typed this dude's name into Google and been like, ooh, I don't know if I want to talk to this guy and interview him. Did he pay you to do this? Is this a puff piece? Undisclosed? What is this? I'm so angry that I'm just gonna wrap this up here because I'm getting too mad. This makes me so mad, and I can't even clearly articulate why. It's so many little things about it make me so angry. So I'm gonna wrap it up there. Thanks guys. I've been Mac. Peace out. Bye.